minutes' time. I'll have PMQs Unpacked. PMQs Unpacked. Now, regular listeners will know that after PMQs in the afternoons, I often pop up on in the afternoons with Jane and Fee. So we were thought, well, let's make this let's complete the circle. So every week at this time, Jane and or Fee will join us live to make a prediction about what might come up for PMQs, and then I will join them for PMQs Unpacked, where we will unpack what happened at PMQs to see if their prediction was right. And so joining me for the first PMQs pre-packed, sort of works, Times Radio's very own Fee Clever. Fee, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. So it's basically our shows are eating each other, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cannibalisation.
It means we don't need to book another guest, you don't need to book another guest. It's just...
It's so transparent.
It's so transparent. It's nice to be transparent with the
listeners. No, it's very nice.
It means they can't accuse us. It means they can't accuse us of... Now, you've...
Yes.
You came... Oh, when was it? A few months ago, you came in and did PMQs Unpacked with us.
Yes.
Do you enjoy it?
I do, yep. So I don't want to blow too much smoke in your direction.
No, I meant. Sorry, do you enjoy PMQs as a spectacle rather than me?
No, anyway, this is what I'm about to get to.
Okay, fine. Okay.
I do like the way that you do PMQs because I think actually, in previous iterations of my life, when I've been on radio stations where PMQs have been covered, it's just quite a great big block of stuff to offer to the listener to then go back and say, well, of course the fun bit was at the beginning. I mean, it's incredibly staged, it's quite well written, you hope sometimes, and what's not in the script is just asking listeners to sit all the way through right till the very dribbles at the end and then go back and try and do it all again. So I like the way you do it.
Very good. So let's I'll get my pencil. What do you think might
come okay, right.
We're
actually going to do something now, aren't we?
The easiest question I've asked anyone on the show today.
Well, and I mean, it's just quite an easy answer, isn't it? Because, of course, it's going to be the Horizon scandal. I mean, I think it's just got to be speed of compensation and exoneration, hasn't it? And it's got to be a complete... hey, aren't I so clever, gag-free zone, because it's just so serious, and that's where the public mood is at the moment, isn't it? We're pressed up against the glass, just going, come on, let's see what happens next.
So. I mean, if the government was an absolute Rolls-Royce machine, they'd have perhaps, someone in the government would have spotted this drama was coming and might have had something up their sleeves last week. They do feel like there's been a bit caught on the hop by the whole Farrago, and the fact it's really struck a nerve. So as we understand it, there's going to be a statement. There's an urgent question at 12:30. David Davis, former cabinet minister, has got an urgent question, which means a minister will have to answer that on the post office.
Yeah.
I think.
What does that mean for what then gets asked?
I think that. I don't know. I'm speculating. Rishi Sunak, if it's good news, Rishi Sunak will want to announce and not leave it to a junior minister in response to an urgent question. I suspect the urgent question has been granted by the Speaker because he'll be annoyed that Rishi Sunak is going to do it in the context of PMQs and not as a proper statement, which can then be interrogated. But so basically what the urgent question will be an exercise in backbench MPs being able to interrogate exactly what it is that Rishi Sunak has actually announced. Because obviously there will be loads of questions.
Yep.
And whatever it is they announce, particularly on the convictions, there'll be questions about, because some people just want their day in court and they want to be exonerated by a judge, and others really don't want that, and they're happy with the idea of it being
and then there's precedent and all of those other things that need to be considered. So yes, it's going to be quite a different one. I accept that. But if all of this hadn't happened, I think it could have been quite a fun one, couldn't it? Because you could have some fun with PM Connect. You know. It's the Channel 5 game show nobody wanted, isn't it? And there's just something about it.
He just kept, because they'd sat him in the round.
Yes. So
he didn't know where to look.
Not connected with PM Connect, this is Rishi meets the people, travels all over the country, all that kind of stuff. I always think it's just a bad idea to give those things a name. It's just, it's a little bit of ammunition, isn't it? Whatever you call it.
Well, because they used to be, I mean, obviously in format terms, it's completely different to PM Direct, which is what David Cameron did. Yeah. Which was an evolution of Cameron Direct, which is what he used to do in opposition.
Yeah. It's no good, is it? No. And it's just, I mean, you've got to admire the impetus for it, because of course you should go out and meet the people. Of course you should try and, step aside from all of this.
Yeah.
But I think just the PM Connect thing, and it's just not what Rishi Sunak...
Sitting in a circle of Tories isn't necessarily the way to show you to do it. If you were a backbench MP asking a slightly more light-hearted question, what's currently annoying you this week that you'd like to ask the Prime Minister about?
Oh, I don't know whether I would find something kind of light-hearted. I think you can. I think you can have a little bit of a pop at anybody from the Conservative Party who is trying to maintain the position of a broad church. I think one person's broad church is the other person's festering open wound, which is impossible to get stitched during a junior hospital doctor's strike.
Very good. That's perfect. We like that. Let's see if anyone picks up and runs with that. So what time am I on with you? Quarter past three. 10 past 3.
Way more about this feature than I do.
3:15. It's good. I think it's good when things evolve on air.
It is. I'm looking forward to this very much.
Very good. So I will join Jane and Fee just after 3 o'clock to find out was Fee right? The post office scandal came up in PMQs. God, see, that's what you. Oh, it's the jeopardy. It's the jeopardy that we like. Right, Tim Shipman is here. PMQs Unpacked is live on Times Radio and on the YouTube channel. You can watch along. Get on the YouTubes now. PMQs Unpacked, the very first one of an election year, is next on Times Radio.
On DAB Digital Radio, on the Times Radio app, and on your smart speaker. Politics from every angle. Times Radio.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Matt Chorley, and this is Times Radio. In a moment, PMQs Unpacked. First, a look at the headlines this lunchtime. We're waiting to see if Rishi Sunak announces a solution for the victims of the Post Office Horizon scandal in the next few minutes. The government said to be actively considering passing a law to quash the convictions of more than 700 postmasters wrongly convicted of fraud because of faulty computer software. We will bring you Rishi Sunak's statement or announcement just as soon as we get it. The boss of HS2 has told MPs that the cost of building the high-speed rail line from London to Birmingham has risen again to nearly £67 billion. Last year, the second phase from Birmingham to Manchester was scrapped because of concerns about value for money. The price of the baby formula Aptamil should come down next week after the manufacturer said it would charge retailers less for it. The competition watchdog's been investigating the formula market, with prices jumping by nearly a quarter in 2 years. And the world's first pothole-filling robot will be tested on roads in Hertfordshire. It uses artificial intelligence to spot surface holes and cracks, then fills them automatically. And we'll have a full news roundup in an hour's time. But now, live on Times Radio and on the Times Radio YouTube channel, it's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
Order, PMQs Unpacked.
I call Matt Chorley and Tim Shipman.
Yes, that's the all-new jingle, thanks to 4-year-old Cordelia and big fan of the show. Tim Shipman's here. How are you?
I'm very well.
Happy New Year.
Yes. Well, here we are, ready to be gripped by a titanic battle for the Premiership that will run for most of the year.
For most of the year. Yeah, absolutely. What do you think might come up today?
Oh, I think post offices might come up, mightn't it, Matthew? I mean, this is a classic occasion where, you know, the Prime Minister can probably take a bit of sting from Starmer's opening sallies by having something meaningful to say on that issue. Otherwise, I think they'll both want to frame their big sort of election arguments, which we've seen them wheeling out at, a whole series of mind-numbingly exciting events over the last week. Town hall meetings and speeches, and here we are.
Here we are. A big election.
No election till November, I'm told, but good Lord, they're at it already. Not another one.
They really are at it already. So lots of people already watching along on the YouTube channel. Hello from Holzkirchen in Bavaria. I think that's the first time we've had a Bavarian viewer. Stephen is in Taunton. Gareth is in Swansea. Good morning from Australia, says Daffyd. Or good night, he says. Richard is in Fleet. Loads and loads and loads of people on the YouTube channel. Get along and watch along live. It's going to be a big one. We normally would kick off with Keir Starmer and his first question, but the issue of post offices has already come up. So we go live to the Commons now, see what Rishi Sunak's been saying.
Mr. Speaker, this is one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in our nation's history. People who worked hard to serve their communities had their lives and their reputations destroyed through absolutely no fault of their own. The victims must get justice and compensation. Sir Win Williams' inquiry is undertaking crucial work to expose what went wrong, and we've paid almost £150 million in compensation to over 2,500 victims. But today I can announce that we will introduce new primary legislation to make sure that those convicted as a result of the Horizon scandal are swiftly exonerated and compensated. We will also introduce a new upfront payment of £75,000 for the vital GLO group of postmasters. And can I thank my honourable friend, the member for Thirsk and Malton, for all his hard work on this issue. He will set out more details to the House shortly. We will make sure that the truth comes to light, we right the wrongs of the past, and the victims get the justice they deserve.
So there we have it. Rishi Sunak's big announcement on the government's reaction to the Mr. Bates versus the Post Office drama that unfolded last week. They will bring forward primary legislation to exonerate swiftly, he said, those convicted, and an upfront payment of £75,000 for the GLO group, which I think is one of the groups. There are 3 different groups pursuing compensation. The GLO group is one of them. This is quite a big moment, Tim, for Parliament to act to, in quite a big group, reverse the rulings of court. This is pretty unprecedented.
As far as I'm aware, it's fairly unprecedented. And in a sense, it's sort of what Sunak's been trying to do on Rwanda, which is say, we didn't like the court ruling, so we're going to change it in Parliament. And it's a good example of how, the British Constitution actually works, which is that Parliament is sovereign ultimately, and can tell the courts what to do. Things don't work quite the same way in the United States. So it's, it's a big one. There's not a lot of detail there. As ever, the devil is hidden therein. We don't know how quickly, we don't know how much compensation. Does this cover everybody? There's some suggestion that there may be a handful of people who were actually fraudulent, and they're trying not to sort of get them mixed up in the same thing. But it's obviously been, it's good news on what has become a major issue of public moment. I think somewhat to the surprise of us, some of us who've been sort of following this for quite some time now. And the Prime Minister saying it's one of the greatest miscarriages of justice, ever in Britain. It's just slightly begged the question why it's taken quite so long to get to this point. It's one of those scandals that I think, was it Danny Finkelstein wrote quite an intelligent column about this, saying it didn't really trigger kind of, the left weren't particularly outraged for any reason, the right weren't particularly outraged for some ideological reason. It didn't talk. Politics kind of works and people get furious when their existing prejudices about how things operate are kind of triggered. And, he wrote quite a clever piece that sort of said, in this case, it didn't really trigger anybody. And as a consequence, it's sort of been allowed to fester. And it's quite a good example of how people ought to pay a bit more attention to the detail in government than worrying just
and
about whether
there's
the media
been a lot
are
of
getting
people say,
excited.
it's the media, but people in government whose job it was to know this stuff knows that it's been a miscarriage of justice for a long time.
They do, and frankly, we wouldn't be here without the media because newspapers, particularly the Times, have written endlessly about this. But it was only when a book gets written and it then appears on television that everyone seems to finally get excited.
Fact, I hadn't realised this, but the drama came about after Katie Glass wrote a piece, I think it was in the Sunday Times magazine, and she was then contacted by the producer, and it's set in train then, and then Nick Wallace got on board, who's written for the Private Eye and the bit in the book. So that's
and it's certainly the case that the media perhaps didn't regard this as sexy a subject as it now appears to be. But the fault really lies with ministers who've, as you say, they've known for a long time that this is a botched job, and for a long time it was all about cover up.
I can't actually remember who was the Prime Minister at the time when the courts overturned that small group of convictions, but somebody could have stood up at that point and said, we're going to speed up compensation and reverse them. Right, let's go back to the House of Commons then, because the interesting question here is, does Keir Starmer follow up with questions on the Post Office, or does he choose to say, well, you've done the right thing on that, and we're going to talk about something else? So let's go to the House of Commons now. Question number 1 from Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I heard what the Prime Minister just said about the Post Office scandal. It is a huge injustice. People lost their lives, their liberty and their livelihood, and they've been waiting far too long for the truth, for justice and for compensation. So I'm glad the Prime Minister is putting forward a proposal. We will look at the details, and I think it's the job of all of us to make sure that it delivers the justice that is so needed. Mr. Speaker, back in 2022, when Boris Johnson claimed he would send asylum seekers to Rwanda, one ambitious Tory MP had reservations. He agreed with Labour that it wouldn't work. It was a waste of money. It was the latest in a long line of gimmicks. Does the Prime Minister know what happened to that MP?
Well, Mr. Speaker, what that honourable gentleman refers to is a document that he hasn't seen, I haven't seen, and has been reported second-hand in a bunch of media newspapers. But what I can tell him is, I am absolutely clear that you do need to stop the boats, and that's what this government and that MP is going to deliver.
Right, so Keir Starmer taking the view that the post office is the post office. He said what he needs to say about it, but there is a more fruitful line of political inquiry.
What a surprise.
Not least with the Rwanda bill back in the Commons next week, and Tory MPs and the right of the party lining up to say that they're not happy with it. For the avoidance of doubt, if you haven't been following this story closely over the weekend, the BBC got hold of some papers which suggested that Rishi Sunak had significant doubts about sending migrants to Rwanda when he was Chancellor. They suggested he wanted to scale back Number 10's original plans. He wasn't sure if they'd stop channel crossings. And obviously since then, he's made it one of his top priorities. Quite a funny way into it from Keir Starmer.
Yes, all right. I mean, yeah. Is he now going to reveal to the Prime Minister his own identity at the start of question 2? Yes, no, it's fine. And it's perfectly, sensible line of attack. I thought the PM's answer was quite interestingly dismissive there. He took quite a while to start talking. He was a little bit wrong-footed, didn't quite know which direction to go. And then we get a bunch of media newspapers. Oh, the wicked media. Well, firstly, as you rightly point out, it was firstly on the BBC, not a bunch of media newspapers. I'm not quite sure what non-media newspapers would look like.
The ones done by councils.
But the PM does find questions. He finds questions from the media. He finds questions from this Starmer chap. Really quite irritating to his general well-being, and that's coming across already, which is, you're not normally a bit hissy-fitty in question one.
Crucially, in that answer was not a denial of the central charge that when he was Chancellor, he thought that the Rwanda policy was a daft idea.
Well, I mean, it's his job as Chancellor to say we need value for money and it must work. Maybe he did think it was a daft idea. A lot of people share that view, of course. But, the way politics works, you inherit the policy as Prime Minister, and frankly, you've got to make it work. Otherwise, you're in a world of pain with a certain section of voters and with your own party. So Rishi Sunak it's one of those areas, again, where just a little bit of candour about these things might actually take him a long way. But instead, I've never seen this document. Oh, right.
But also, if you said, yes, I did raise questions about value for money, those questions were answered. Now I think it's a great idea, and that's why I'm playing on with it.
That's another way you could answer
that. It's slightly better than saying, it was basically not a denial to say, this is something in the papers, you've not seen it, I've not seen it, and then we're going to talk about something else. Anyway, let's go back to the House of Commons then, because clearly Keir Starmer's decided that Rwanda is the way to go today. It's question number 2 from Keir Starmer.
I notice he didn't deny it, Mr. Speaker. I'm not surprised. £400 million of taxpayer money down the drain. No one sent to Rwanda. Small boats still coming. It's hardly a surprise he wanted to scrap the scheme when he was trying to sneak in as Tory leader. But he's been caught red-handed opposing the very thing that he's now made his flagship policy. Which member should we listen to? The one before us today, or the one who used to believe in something?
Mr. Speaker.
Tory MP is enjoying that. Given,
and it's an opening for Sunak. Let's see how he responds.
Mr. Speaker, I've always been crystal clear. You do need to have an effective deterrence to finally solve this problem. In fact, the National Crime Agency agree that you need, in their words, an effective removals and deterrence agreement. And that's why, after becoming Prime Minister, I negotiated a new deal with Albania, thanks to which we have seen a 93% drop in illegal arrivals from Albania. That's how Australia stopped the boats. That's why Italy, Germany and Austria are all looking at similar schemes. He's the only one who's opposed to a proper deterrent. Not because it doesn't work, because he doesn't actually believe in controlling migration, Mr. Speaker. Every single time he picks the people smugglers over the British people.
Wow. Well, I just want to point out, if you're not watching along on the YouTube channel, Oliver Dowden enjoyed the prospect of Keir Starmer accusing someone else of not believing anything. So his face went the same colour as Michelle Dolan's bright red jacket.
Well, indeed. But interesting, because there were two ways Sunak could have answered that question. The reason Tory MPs were jeering is because they don't think Starmer does believe in anything. They think he says what he needs to say to get elected. And one of the Tory lines of attack on Starmer this year will be that we don't really know what he's going to do because he's not levelling with the electorate and he keeps changing his mind. The other line of attack is that he's actually secretly a wicked lefty who's going to throw open the doors. And that's the route that Sunak went down there, saying, you know, he does believe in something. He believes in not controlling migration. He could have picked either one of those, and perhaps that was the easier course of action off the hoof for the Prime Minister. But if he could have put together a big answer about all the things where Starmer's changed his mind and appears not to believe in anything, I think you'd have had an even bigger sort of success there.
But it goes back to the fact that Tories can't quite work out what their central charge against
exactly.
It
was the same problem the Tories had before Blair arrived. They couldn't decide whether he was a secret lefty or whether he was just Bambi who didn't believe in anything. And they've got the same problem now with Starmer. Now, some of those questions are legitimate, and I hear them from voters in focus groups and in people in my own life who say we still don't really know what he's going to do. Labour are calculating they don't need to put a huge amount of flesh on those bones just to say, well, it'll be better than this lot.
And in fact, we've got a focus group tomorrow on the show. We recorded it last night, and you're completely right. It was absolutely diabolical for the Tories. But the idea, we still had people saying they were going to vote Labour, but they don't know anything about. They couldn't sum up Keir Starmer in a word because they didn't know enough about him.
No, and the challenge for Labour is that Labour can't sum up Keir Starmer in a word either.
Right, let's see if Keir Starmer can sum himself up in a handful of words. Let's go back to the House of Commons. Question number 3 from Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, we should smash the gangs, process the claims and end hotel use. That's our plan. And unlike the Prime Minister, I believe in it.
I'm going to hear the questions. I don't want interruptions,
Common Speaker
please.
Lindsay
It's
Hoyle.
very important. It's a very important topic.
Ticking off
and I take
Tory
issues that I hope
MPs
members
sitting just
also
to his
wish
right.
start taking it seriously. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, last year he started the year saying he was Mr. Steady. Then at his conference he was Mr. Change. Now he's flipped back to Mr. More of the same. Doesn't matter how many relaunches, flip-flops he does, he'll always be Mr. Nobody. And here's the tragedy of his leadership. He spends the whole time trying to convince people not to believe their own eyes, pretending that debt is falling, that the economy is going gangbusters, the NHS is in great shape. When he finally finds something he was right about, the Rwanda gimmick, he can't even take credit for it. When's he going to stop pretending that up is down, that black is white, admit that whether it's the economy, immigration, the NHS, he has failed?
Before we come to Rishi Sunak's response, if I was the Tories, I'd clip up Keir Starmer there saying the economy's going gangbusters, the NHS is in great shape. I can't remember what the other one was. It would just be quite funny if he did that. Let's go back to the House of Commons then. This is Rishi Sunak's answer.
Mr. Speaker, well, let's just go through his checklist. He talks about the backlog, 112,000 decisions made last year, a higher number than in any year in the past 2 decades, Mr. Speaker. He talked about hotels. Well, the first 50 are being closed and there are more to come, Mr. Speaker. He talks about the numbers. Well, they were down by over a third last year, Mr. Speaker, the first time that's happened. And then he talked, Mr. Speaker, he talked about smashing the gangs. Well, if he does care about smashing the gangs, why doesn't he own up to the fact that when it came to the Nationality and Borders Act, he blocked, delayed and voted against the powers in that act, which have allowed us to now arrest hundreds and hundreds of people connected with that illegal trade who have been sentenced to hundreds of years in prison. He opposed that because he chooses the criminal gangs over the British people every time.
I mean, we are getting, as you predicted, Tim, a sort of shape of the political attacks from the two sides.
So Starmer's straight in with, you've twisted and turned and changed what you're trying to present to the country. And your basic argument, Rishi Sunak, is that everything's fine and it's not, and the people out there know it's not. You're saying black is white. That's the Starmer kind of assault. And the Sunak defence is all the things you claim you're going to do, we're already doing, have already done, and frankly, you know, you don't really know what you're talking about on that front. And a lot of Tories do find the Labour plan on illegal immigration sort of slightly laughable. You know, the idea that he's going to come in and set up a sort of new unit in the NCA that's going to tackle the gap. There already is a unit in the NCA, and they say we've done all this and we've done the upstream work with the other countries. And Starmer is a bit naive about thinking that that's all going to work. But then he hits him with this, you back the criminal gangs. Now, if anyone who's been looking at some of the tabloid newspapers over the last week will have seen a lot of attacks on Starmer working pro bono for killers on death row as part of his campaign against the death penalty. But that is then depicted by The Sun and others, with some help, I suspect, from the Conservative Research Department, to sort of say, this guy supports wrong-uns, and you're going to hear a lot more of that, and Sunak's not pulling his punches there. Whether we get onto any of that material or not in one of his answers, I don't know. I suspect the Tories will be too cute to sort of claim ownership of something that at the moment looks like this. Yes, exactly. But that's very much the theme. You can't trust this fella because ultimately he's a do-gooding liberal who puts the rights of killers, paedophiles and illegal migrants ahead of you and your family.
And that then becomes the shape of the election campaign as we see it. This is PMQs Unpacked. It's Matt Chorley with Tim Shipman in the studio. We're pausing the action live from the House of Commons as we always do. If you missed the beginning, just to bring you up to date on what Rishi Sunak had to say about the Horizon scandal, the post office scandal, which has just caught the public attention since that ITV drama Mr Bates versus the Post Office aired last week. The Prime Minister announced that the government will now introduce legislation to ensure those convicted as a result of the scandal are swiftly exonerated and compensated. So primary legislation will be brought into the House of Commons, which will overturn the convictions. We think from what we've heard so far, all of those convicted as a result of the Horizon IT software. There's also this group, the Group Litigation Order Group of Sub-Postmasters, the so-called GLO group. They will get a new upfront payment of £75,000 in compensation. I think that's while other details of compensation will be looked at in more detail, because obviously they're looking at some cases how much they were wrongly told to pay back, or how much they were wrongly forced to spend on legal action. So those are the details. Rishi Sunak announcing the legislation will be brought forward, so they are swiftly exonerated and compensated. We'll get more details on that from the Post Office Minister in a statement after 12:30. And I think we're going to hear from two sub-postmasters within the hour to get their reaction to that. But let's go back to the House of Commons then. This is question number 4 from Keir Starmer.
I don't think we are. Keir Starmer.
Or indeed,
Mr. Speaker, we can all see what's happened here. Just like he knows that debt isn't falling and taxes are going up, he knows the Rwanda gimmick won't work. But he can't be honest about it because he's too scared of his own MPs. Doesn't he wish he'd stuck to his guns rather than to allow himself to be taken hostage by his own party?
Mr. Speaker, we're debating this because we have taken a stand and we're delivering the toughest migration plan ever to end the legal challenges and actually get flights off the ground. And let's be clear about this. He doesn't have a single practical idea about how to stop the boats. But that's because he doesn't actually care about controlling migration. This is a person who described all immigration law as racist, Mr. Speaker. He thinks limits on economic migration are, in his words, economic vandalism. It didn't even feature once in his 5 missions, and he didn't mention it once in his conference speech. The truth is, he's pro-free movement, he's anti-border control, and he can never be trusted to stop the boats.
Slightly the same, going around the same.
Well, it wasn't much of a question, and it wasn't much of an answer, I think, ultimately. I mean, have you been taken hostage? Are you aware you've been taken hostage by your own party? Oh, yes, I have. Thank you for pointing it out.
Well, do you know what? I did think even question 3 from he was Mr. He was Mr. Continuity, Mr. Change, Mr. whatever it was. Now he's Mr. Nobody. That felt like question 6 from Keir Starmer, not number 3. So I wonder how much more.
It's going to be a long year, Matthew, is all I can say. But, I mean, this is an issue that both sides think works for them, interestingly. Labour think this is evidence of Tory incompetence and Tory fanaticism, and the Tories regard it as something where Labour is ideologically unsound, and it reveals a sort of lack of honesty about how you actually get to grips with this stuff. So they're both happy to parrot their lines while our ears gently bleed.
Somebody's posted on the YouTube channel, what did one flip-flop say to the other flip-flop? You're a flip-flop. Which sums up a large part of...
it sums it up, and it's about the level of humour that we've heard today as well.
87222, start measure the word Times. You want to text us or post a comment on the Times Radio YouTube channel. We can watch along live, so you can see the action. You can see Tim and I, and you can see what's going on in the House of Commons. Just how red in the face is Oliver Dowden going. Let's go back to the House of Commons. Question number 5.
I think we should smash the gangs. And I spent 5 years of my life doing exactly. This is the party that's lost control of the borders. And whilst he's tending to the Tory party, the country is left without government. Yes. A collapse in dentistry, leaving people literally pulling out their own teeth. Flood defences completely exposed. Hundreds of thousands of children still out of school. His government appears blissfully uninterested in what's going on outside the walls of Westminster. Does he realise how ludicrous it looks when he spends his time boasting whilst Britain is breaking?
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad he brought up our schools, because there's nothing more important than ensuring our children get a world-class education, and that's why I'm pleased that in spite of Labour opposing every reform that we made, our children are now the best readers in the Western world, Mr. Speaker. But he's right that attendance is important, and that's why we're investing millions of pounds more to provide support for absent pupils. We launched a national campaign, and just this week we've doubled the number of attendance hubs to support over 1,000 at the most vulnerable schools. But I am surprised to hear him raise that topic, because from longer lockdowns or voting against our minimum service laws, his priority has always been keeping our children out of school, Mr. Speaker. It's always the same with him. There's no plan. It's just peddling one thing to his union friends and another thing to the British people.
Oh, the union's got to...
Oh, I'm not sure.
We've not had
no mention of paymasters.
Oh, union
Matthew.
union friends.
I think you need paymasters.
Okay, fine. I'll take it back. I'll take my bell back.
To bong.
Keir Starmer, again, that felt like a sort of question 6 roundup.
Yeah, they both were.
Having not done what you would do, which is a question on Rwanda, a question on dentists, a question on floods, questions on children out of school. It all feels a bit disjointed and odd.
Yeah, I mean, he's still trying to make this broad argument that everything's a shambles and the government's to blame. And then, I mean, it was sort of odd, really. I mean, and then reels out the line that sort of to try and capture all of that, boasting while Britain is breaking. I can see what he's trying to do there, and I applaud the alliterative B's and the fact that is at least a pithy way of trying to, but it's not good enough.
No.
It's a C+ effort at that thought.
I think
so
they need a bit longer in front of the flip chart.
They need to have another go at that, but politically I can see how that might work. And then Sunak sort of missed a slight opening on the way back, where Starmer did boast about, I spent 5 years of my life smashing the gangs. Well, that could have been a moment where Sunak then said, well, while we're talking about your 5 years, mate, being a prosecutor, that could have been a way of getting into all the stuff we were talking about before. Instead, he latches onto education, which we know is a Sunak interest, but I don't think anything much that he said in response really was notable, apart from that we're again back to still trying to pin lockdown on the Labour Party, and when he starts talking about minimum service levels, we're back into sort of unions and strikes. So I'm pretty sure we've seen almost every possible conceivable
grabbing at anything, line of
attack from both sides. But this is not a particularly coherent sort of set of questions from Starmer, and there's nothing yet that Sunak has done in response that will leave the Tories thinking, oh, well, that was all right.
Because one strategy, which can prove quite successful at PMQs, is you ask 6 questions on 6 different topics.
Yeah.
So you ask a question on Rwanda, and then you let Rishi Sunak answer on that. And then you ask a question about floods, but then Rishi Sunak still trying to come back on Rwanda. And then you move on and talk about schools, but he's still trying to say, well, actually, no, but on the floods point, blah, 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 and he gets in the right muddle. And then you put it all together and tie a bow around it, say nothing's working. And he hasn't really done that. He's... yeah. Anyway, let's see what he does with the last
question. Not working, Prime Minister. It's hurting. What do you think?
That's less good than boasting while Britain is breaking.
Okay.
Stop.
See, that's why I'm...
Stop the boasts.
Stop the boasts. No.
Does that work?
Stop the boats and... Yeah.
Stop the boats.
Stop the boats.
Stop this, says producer Erin. Right, fine. We'll go back to the House of Commons then. This is the final question, number 6 from Keir Starmer.
New year, new nonsense. Every week he stands here and tells the country they should be thanking him, not questioning him.
Fair enough.
Point out that the view on the ground is very different to that from his private jet, and he says you're talking the country down. He just doesn't get it. He doesn't get what a cost of living crisis feels like. He doesn't know any schools where kids no longer turn up. And he doesn't understand what it's like to wait for a hospital appointment. Doesn't the country deserve so much better than a Prime Minister who simply doesn't get Britain?
Mr. Speaker, well, from the last week we had, yet another half-hour speech from the Honourable Gentleman, and what a surprise, yet again, it didn't contain a single new idea. We've had 4 years of him as Labour leader, and it's still all slogan, no plan, Mr. Speaker. Now, just this weekend, Mr. Speaker, we're delivering on our plan to cut people's taxes, Mr. Speaker. He doesn't have a plan. We've got a plan to stop the boats. He doesn't have a plan. And we've got a plan to get people off welfare and into work. He doesn't have a single idea. It's crystal clear, Mr. Speaker. Stick with us to deliver the long-term change that the country needs. Don't go back to square one with him.
I wasn't sure new year, new nonsense, whether that was aimed at the Prime Minister or us.
Well, it feels a bit like the whole enterprise is neatly summed up. I mean, it was so bad, it was good.
Yeah.
It was as if Chris Morris had suddenly started, writing for PMQs. I mean, that was by far the best question and answer, though, and that, summing up everything. Sunak is seen by voters as out of touch. He's too rich. He doesn't get it. And I'm not sure simply doesn't get Britain is quite there either. But again, you can see where they're going with that. He doesn't understand what it feels like. All of that, I think, will cut through. But equally, the Sunak response is a pretty decent crystallisation of what they're going to say about Starmer. Their Tory big thing is always just have plans. This was always Linton Crosby's thing. David Cameron had a long-term economic plan. No one knew what was in it, including David Cameron. But it didn't matter because the public knew that there was a plan. And if Sunak can keep saying, we've got a plan for this, a plan for that, and Starmer won't tell you what he's up to, don't go back to square one with him. I mean, all this rhetoric needs a little bit of work, but you can see, where they're going.
It's the emergence of the...
And in a sort of...
messaging.
if this was the sort of third attempt by the Tories to get re-elected, you could see that Sunak might have half a chance with that line of attack. Given that it's the fifth and that the public appears to have given up on his party completely, it's going to be more difficult for him. But, there is the kernel there on both sides of an effective election message. Whether it's going to make any difference for the Tories is more of a moot point, really.
Oh, but I've just checked. It seems that every 2 years, Keir Starmer says he just doesn't get it in the House of Commons. He did it in 2020 with Boris Johnson. He did it in 2022 with... Who would that have been? Still Boris Johnson. And now he's done it with Rishi Sunak. So give it 2 years' time. Who knows where we'll be in 2 years' time. Anyway, New Year, new nonsense. That was my favourite. One of my favourite things I've heard in PMQs for a long time.
It's not much of an introduction to Lara Spirit, is it?
Unbelievable. Lara Spirit is here. She's been watching the Best of the West so that you don't have to. We'll find out what the backbench questions have been raising, and we'll bring you, when the Post Office Minister sets out some more details of Rishi Sunak's plans to exonerate and compensate sub-postmasters. We'll bring you that live as well. That's next on Times Radio.
Politics without the boring bits. Matt Chorley on Times Radio.
As it's Riviera.
Matt Chorley on Times Radio. We just brought you PMQs Unpacked. Keir Starmer asking all 6 questions, on Rwanda and then other government failings as he sees them. Before that, Rishi Sunak announced that the government will bring forward legislation to swiftly, he said, exonerate and compensate sub-postmasters caught up in the Horizon scandal. We are awaiting a further statement from the Post Office Minister. We'll bring you details of that when we get it. And we're also going to try and speak to a couple of sub-postmasters as well to get their response to it. But Lara Spirit's been watching the backbench exchanges so that we don't have to. Overall...
Yeah, pretty interesting.
Pretty interesting. We'll take that.
No new nonsense
here.
New year,
new nonsense. Where are we going first?
We are going to Stephen Flynn.
Yay! Of course we are.
On this question of the Horizon scandal, we're only going to play the first of the 2 questions. In the second answer, Sunak says that he finds the politicisation of this from Flynn sad. But I think take a listen to how he shapes this issue with regard to the specific case against a number of different politicians from a number of different political parties in Westminster.
Mr. Speaker, a Horizon system introduced by Tony Blair, the former Labour Party leader and of course now a Knight's Garter, a Horizon system defended by the current leader of the Liberal Democrats, himself a Knight bachelor, a Horizon system scandal overseen by a former Conservative Prime Minister who now hides in the House of Lords as a baron. The reality is that sub-postmasters never stood a chance against the Westminster establishment, did they?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I've said, this is actually one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in our country's history. And all our thoughts are with those who worked so hard for their communities and have seen their lives and reputations destroyed. And since this scandal, as the Honourable Gentleman pointed out, has actually unfolded over decades, and with multiple people clearly at fault. But since 2019 in the High Court case, this government established a statutory inquiry led by Sir Win Williams to uncover what went wrong, established an independent advisory board, and has established 3 different compensation schemes, paying out £150 million to over 2,500 people, with now almost 2/3 having received final compensation. But we must go further and faster, Mr. Speaker, which is why we have made new announcements today.
I can see what Stephen Flynn's trying to do. It's all the Westminster government's fault. But does that work?
I don't think as effectively as a lot of his attempts to tie the main parties together. I mean, making a slightly silly point about that they've all been given honours is odd, though he might have had a more pertinent point if he'd pointed to the benches around him, because Ed Davey, the night bachelor who he was having a pop out there for the Lib Dems, my understanding is the Lib Dems had a question at PMQs today, but that the leader of the Liberal Democrats is absent with for personal reasons. Now, there may be good personal reasons.
My understanding is they are quite good personal reasons.
In which case,
involving
fine.
his family,
But I suspect a lot of people are thinking those personal reasons might be that he doesn't want to hear anything more about the Horizon scandal.
Where else are we going now, Lara?
We are going for the not so new but new-ish Tory MP Steve Tuckwell in Uxbridge, and to this question of new hospitals, which is not something that you hear Conservative MPs.
40 new hospitals.
40 new hospitals, which were then downgraded to 32 new hospitals, which I think currently stand at 3 new hospitals that have been open, but nonetheless they are highlighted here, so let's have a listen.
In my constituency, the new Hillingdon Hospital has full planning permission, has full funding, and enabling works is well underway. Would my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, agree with me that this new state-of-the-art hospital will uplift the health benefits for the residents of Uxbridge and South Ruislip, and when he join me in visiting the project site at a time where his diary allows?
My honourable friend has been a fantastic campaigner for the new Hillingdon Hospital, and I agree with him that it will provide fantastic care to him and his constituents as well. And I'm pleased that planning permission and funding has now been granted for the site and work is progressing. I will look at my diary, but in the meantime I can tell him that my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, will be very happy to come and visit my honourable friend's project and see the significant progress for herself.
Yeah, I might be busy, but someone else could come and have a look.
I mean, it is a bit strange if you do get one of them built that you wouldn't go and have a photo op there. Surely that's one of the easiest things to commit to that you could.
And why wouldn't you?
I guess
I hear this a lot from people who try to get the Prime Minister to do anything. I'm even told that before the wheeze came up that David Cameron, rejoined the government, that someone tried to get him to go and see Cameron, or Cameron to go and see him, and Cameron's people were told, "Oh, he's a very busy man." Yeah, he's the Prime Minister. Of course, he's a busy man, but there are things Prime Ministers should make time for. And there is this slight sense that Rishi Sunak just sort of, he exists a bit in his own bubble and doesn't like being taken out of it very often. Yeah, go and see the hospital.
We'd have thought so. Like you said, it's a win.
It's a rare win on the hospital front.
On the subject of, we were talking about the PM Connect earlier with Fee Glover, and she wasn't sure about the name. Jim says PM Connect sounds like a slow, dirty replacement bus for a broken down train. Like the afternoon
in the
service.
late afternoon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anything else for us, Lara? Or was that it?
I was told that was it today.
That is it.
But why don't they call it something interesting? Rishi Unleashed or something.
Yeah.
I mean, however absurd.
Yeah.
PM Connect.
What should they call it? That's a good idea. We can come up with a name. Text us 87222. Start your message with the word Times.
Rishi roams or something. I mean, he's coming to your town. Stand by. Try and drum up some excitement. Make it John Major and his soapbox.
I think the thing we've established today is we're not that good at slogans too.
We're not very good at slogans, but
you've just realised.
We did come up with a good one once. I can't remember what it was. Was it Enough is Enough? And then Angela Rayner used it a lot at PMQs. Anyway, this is just chatting on the radio now. Lara, what time will you be in people's inboxes with the PMQs Unpacked red box email?
3 p.m.
3 p.m. I'm going to write that down.
You're very welcome to it. It now features Tom Peck, of course, Times' sketchwriter,
Yeah.
who contributes to it each week.
He's a very good hire, Tom.
For you from the gallery. He's been really good this week. Not that he hasn't been good, because Christmas break's obviously done him well.
He's a bit naughty. He's funny, isn't he? He's properly funny because some sketch writers get a bit cosy with the world of Westminster, and
he just really doesn't give a monkeys.
He really doesn't.
And everybody gets it. I thought today was brilliant. It was sort of a 90% attacking Bridget Phillipson. There was just a bit of a drive by David Cameron at the end. Lovely stuff. Well done him. At least he knows what he's doing. Lara Spirit will be in your inbox with your red box email this afternoon, and Tim Shipman will be in your Sunday Times at the weekend.
That's the plan.
Very good. Right, up next, we're going to find out what Rishi Sunak's announcement for the sub-postmasters actually means. We're going to speak to 2 former sub-postmasters to get their reaction to the news. They're going to exonerate and compensate sub-postmasters with some emergency legislation. We'll do that next, right here on Times Radio.
Times Radio Breakfast with Asma Mir and Stig Abel.
Over in America,